As sellers, we ask very binary questions. Is there budget or not? There's always budget. Budget is a living organism. It is not a static object. So I think first and foremost, understanding budgets are dynamic and organic. They're not fixed things that get locked. So like someone telling you do or don't have budget, it's just a temporary statement. If you don't have budget, you can still go create it. If you do have budget, you can still go lose it.
Welcome back to another episode of the Elite Selling Podcast. We've got Mr. Art Harding, who is a CRO of GrowthLoop, and we're going to go deep on what it looks like to peel back the curtains and learn about a buyer's perspective. Art has a unique take on what it looks like to purchase technology, what it looks like to sell technology and implement it. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the Elite Selling Podcast. We're very excited to have you here. Your
long time coming, Frankie. Long time coming.
I know.
We finally got him.
The listeners get to hear all the goodness of Art Harding here in a second. What I love about you, Art, is that you've got a unique perspective, kind of like a 360 across go-to-market. You've been an executive in several different roles. You've been on pre-sales. You've been on post-sales. You've been in very technical roles. You've been on more go-to-market roles. So with that said, Art, give us a little bit of, you've been on both sides, buying, selling software. So kick us off on what you're sharing with your team and why this is such an important topic of how to get that unique perspective, not just as a seller, but how buyers think as well.
Sure. I think it was Winston Churchill that said success is moving from one failure to the next without the loss of enthusiasm. So I have certainly touched a number of different go-to-market roles and had the good fortune of working with some large B2B enterprise companies, VMware, Symantec, New Relic, et cetera, that did some really cool things in the industry in both pre and post-sales roles, but then also later on moved into operational roles where I was actually responsible for purchasing software. When you become the buyer of software, Frankie and I talked about this as we were prepping for this podcast. I've joked with more than one sales team that I painfully learned more about selling the first year buying software than I did in years of formal sales training. And what I learned was how much is going on behind the scenes. We talk about building up champions. We talk about those people selling when you're not in the room. That's easy to say, but hard to imagine that most of the folks we're selling to already had full-time jobs, already had a set of priorities and initiatives, and their plate was full. If you've earned the right to talk about what it is you do or the problems you solve, you're actually asking them to pick up a part-time job to actually not only go to work for you, but also deploy political capital. And so we're not in the room when your champion or your EB says, hey, I know we had an annual plan. I know we debated vigorously a set of strategic initiatives. I know that we've set budget aside, but I have a new idea. And I'd like to do this. And what ends up happening is you actually have to create space first to either pause something, redirect something, or go connect with resources that may not be fully in your control. And you have to sell them on changing their priorities. And what I think I underestimated is very little in the B2B world. So I think it's also important that we think about when you're hearing sales advice or you tune into podcasts like this, it's very important for you to ask if what you're hearing, I call them SaaS bumper stickers or selling bumper stickers. You hear these one lines, always be closing, always be qualifying. You really should internalize advice or information through the go-to-market motion of the software you're selling or hardware you're selling and what your target persona and customer is. So most of what I'm going to share today is about B2B enterprise software, infrastructure software, or revenue operations or marketing technology. If you're selling very different software to very different target personas or buyers, maybe what I'm sharing today isn't as relative. But if you're selling B2B, it's very rare that what you're selling is by itself the full solution. You either probably have a dependency on other functions, departments, or capabilities, or your solution is actually a component of a set of solutions that the customer is trying to achieve an outcome. So that means your target buyer has to go invoke and solicit support for resources, money, and calendars that they may not be in full control over. And so while you're trying to forecast a deal, they're trying to forecast how much support they actually have to move ahead with the decision that they're proposing, of which they may only have a portion of the influence over.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know you talk about kind of fitting into the almost like the slipstream of how business is already going, where a lot of sellers will, to your point, just try and throw a new shiny object or a new initiative at a buyer and say, hey, this is going to help you grow revenue or reduce risk, and it's going to be awesome. But you've talked about the thought pattern of going into like the business as usual sale and like how they're already thinking about it, like aligning to their fiscal calendars, aligning to what they're already doing. I think it's easy to say like go find the initiative and attach your product to it, but like can you tell us a little bit more about that and what it's been like on the other side?
Yeah, so I mentioned that thinking like a buyer or actually having the buyer experience was the most useful experience I got as a seller. I'd say the most useful advice I got was from a sales leader I had when I was at Symantec, and she said to me, Art, your job's not to sell Symantec. Your job's to figure out where our prospects and customers are already spending money and connect what Symantec does to those initiatives. And so again, to your point, Frankie, easy to say. This is why we're combing through annual reports and 10Ks and doing broad disco, is you're actually trying to take a heat map of what that prospect or customer has already prioritized. If you can figure out a way to, I think you used the word slipstream, into where the organizational momentum already is, your time to relevancy is going to be a lot higher than if you're trying to get people's attention to say, hey, I know your senior leadership team and teams of folks spent lots of time and effort trying to make priorities. I'd like to switch them. Like you're basically going to bounce off the atmosphere. As opposed to if you can actually figure out what those initiatives really are and connect what you do to either accelerating, amplifying, or de-risking those initiatives. Most of those initiatives are already going to be about driving top line or reducing cost. So you're trying to figure out how to connect to those initiatives and show how they do it. Business as usual, Frankie, gets into if you're a senior executive and you come around the annual planning cycle. And I think for sellers who've not been curious about the fiscal and annual calendar of enterprise customers, it's really important that you understand how do your prospects and customers set about making an annual plan, establishing a budget, and then actually not only prioritizing that budget, but then how that budget gets released. And I think as sellers, we ask very binary questions. Is there budget or not? There's always budget. Budget is a living organism. It is not a static object. And that's why understanding top line performance and margin performance of your customers is so important, because I guarantee the CFO is watching how the company's top line performance in margin is impacting the company's profitability, cash flow, cash burn, earnings statement, et cetera. And so when something goes bounce in the business forest, it will show up in the budget. So your budget could have been approved in Q2, and then the line of what was approved actually shrinks in Q3 because of a bad quarter on top line, unexpected expense. So I think first and foremost, understanding budgets are dynamic and organic. They're not fixed things that get locked. So like someone telling you do or don't have budget, it's just a temporary statement. If you don't have budget, you can still go create it. If you do have budget, you can still go lose it. So I think understanding that that's constantly in motion and that there's going to be trade-offs and negotiations happening between the leaders inside of the business. If you've ever been behind the wire when a company has a good quarter or a bad quarter, when you start hearing you're having a good quarter and there's more margin, everyone starts going to the expense trough to try and carve out budget for that next initiative that didn't quite make it during annual planning. The inverse is also true. Sounds like we're having a tight quarter, earnings call scheduled, mic drop. Maybe the stock dips and there's, news X and YZ company had a bad quarter. Inside the company, people start trying to protect budget and protect it from the meat grinder, which is going to be the reduction of expense. So I think understanding how the company plans priorities, allocates budget, and then how they're monitoring that budget's health as they go on is one skill set. The second part of it is recognizing that on January 1st, if a company's on a fiscal calendar, most everyone's time and most everyone's budget was already subscribed to whatever they were doing the prior year. They already had a full-time job. They largely had a committed budget. For those of us that do multi-year deals, you're actually consuming out your budget. So when a company comes around to January 1st, the first question they're asking is, how much space do we have for new ideas and new thoughts. How much space do we have in terms of human capital and capacity? And how much space do we have in terms of budget that is uncommitted spend? And if you're entering into a fiscal year with a customer or prospect, uncommitted spend is where all the action happens. Business as usual, you're really talking about thinking out in further time frames, and you're looking at them restructuring that historic run rate spend, or what might be called zero-based budgeting by a finance leader, which is they show up and they say, hey, you're getting the same budget you had last year, no incremental. So anything new you want to do, you have to find ways to exchange it out of the money that you're working with from the year before.
I love that. Uncommitted spend. I love the recommendations you have are around doing the heat map, like going back to your original point of find out where your prospects, customers are spending, where are they growing, where are they spending, and attach yourself to that. Love that. I think second piece of that, in order for companies to buy, you need a champion. So I want to get your take on how do you talked about finding those right initiatives, but you also have to, as a seller, find the right people within that org that are change agents that are actually going to push to go get some of that uncommitted spend, or, not bully their way, but actually push a purchase to happen. Curious if you've got experiences in your past where you've seen someone really champion a purchase through and attach or grab some of that uncommitted spend, or maybe you've done that yourself, but would love your take on how to go find those right people.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of signals you can look at in terms of, it never ceases to amaze me how different verticals or different industries impact where power flows. So if you take a digital native Northwest company that's born in technology doing online e-commerce and compare it with a company that has 100+ year heritage with hard manufacturing, not on the West Coast, digitally native. From that very starting point, even how budget gets allocated and who's in charge of driving initiatives, you might see a revenue operations or a chief digital officer driving spend for that newer company, whereas a company with a longer heritage, you may see the CIO and the CFO having a much heavier hand in terms of how the business is planned. So I think in terms of like how to even find the right folks, really understanding not only who your prospect is, but the history of that prospect. I think you can look at things like where headcount is increasing or decreasing to understand where the company is investing. If you start to
Yeah.
see that Department Q is growing at 20%, Department Z is shrinking, that's either a transformation of staff and headcount into technology, or it's an actual shift of power. The other thing is just good old school disco. Everyone from executive assistants to IT managers to directors, everybody wants to get to the C level and the VP. And of course, that's never a bad idea. You'll get to truth a lot faster the more senior you get. But you can pick up smoke signals and some very simple questions I like to ask customers is, hey, when is your annual planning kickoff? So our sales team right now, we're getting ready this summer to make sure that we're aligning with our prospects and customers in annual planning season, which generally starts somewhere in the August through October timeframe, which is where prospects and customers are all coming together to kind of size up how 2025 is going, projecting out how they're going to finish the year, and start arguing and debating what should be the priority for 2026. Those conversations are happening this fall. And then there will be essentially a straw man budget set of initiatives that are put together, performance pending, on how the company finishes the year. And then they may approve 10 initiatives, $10 in budget, and then based on performance, increase that to 11 initiatives and $11, or they may crank it back to 8 initiatives and $8. So you, one, have to get your foot in the door this fall. 2, establish why some budget should be allocated. And then 3, defend it to and through the end of the year. The people that can help you do that you want to make deposits to could include operations teams, finance business partners for the department you're selling to. Of course, the directors, VPs, and senior execs. Reaching out to a senior exec of a certain department, let's say marketing. We've all sold technology to MarTech and RevOps. Reaching out to the CMO and trying to sell them something is very different than reaching out to a CMO and saying, hey, how are you internalizing AI and its impact on marketing in 2026 and beyond? And how could I help you go into annual planning this fall with either information, an informed point of view? Because that CMO or that SVP of marketing, has to show up this fall and tell a story about how over the next 2 or 3 years they're going to introduce AI, the impact that's going to have on headcount, legacy spend, future spend. So if you reach out and say, hey, I've got information and expertise and SMEs on my team, if you have to go into your annual planning this year and take a point of view against your CFO or maybe another department, how can I help you make the case you want to get done for your vision? I don't know, Frankie Griffin. I'm not really sure I have a vision yet. Cool. Well, let's talk about what are your fears or what are your concerns? What are you prioritizing? What are your biggest opportunities and risks? That's a very different disco call. And now you're showing up as a business partner, not a salesperson. And you're trying to help them get through what they're doing right now, which is they need an annual plan for next year. Their teams want promotions. Their teams want to buy new software. Their CEOs telling them they want more for less. So if you can show up as a business partner, they'll tell you who they work with to come up with those plans. Thanks, Griff. That's a great idea. Please go work with Amy. She's really my strategy and ops lead, and Jimmy is our finance leader. Those are the two folks that are going to help me put my budget together. I have 3 themes this year: agentic AI, flat head count over the next 3 years, investing in, etc. And you'll start to get that tail of the tape. And then yes, cool. Can I check back in 3 weeks from now? And what you're doing is you're making IP deposits to make your champion or your EB, if you're using MedPick and command of message lingo, you're equipping them to look good as they're going to fight for budget and prioritization of what you'd like them to spend money on with you in the future. And so there's lots of ways you can make deposits, connecting them with peer references, sharing intellectual property or a point of view that your company has about what's coming and how to prioritize. And I think that's the biggest difference between being on the buyer side versus selling. As sellers, we're motivated quarter to quarter, year to year. We don't know if our territories are going to be the same. We don't know if our numbers are going to be the same. Most of our buyers are assumed they're going to be working at their employer next year. And the decisions they make in 2025, for example, they're going to be answering to in 2027, long after you may have been promoted from enterprise to strategic or commercial to mid-market. They're still going to own this answer. And so their time horizon tends to be multi-year, whereas we're very indexed on when do you want to make a purchase? How quickly can we get this? They have to go articulate not the purchase, but the actual journey over that 1, 2, or 3 year enterprise agreement, and not just how it's going to deliver value up front, but how it's going to evergreen deliver value. That's
How do you balance that then as a seller? You know, if we are targeted on a quarterly, yearly basis, like how do you go in and take that long term perspective where you're getting that pressure from the top down, maybe?
This is probably one of the gray hair moments on the forecast call where I'm going to talk back in the day where we used to have territories that
Yeah,
persisted, year over year. If you were a strategic or named account seller, you'd often own those accounts for extended periods of time, because what's the phrase? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. So the best time to have built pipeline, and to have the information and to have actually integrated what you're selling into a budget was before you need it. And so this is maybe the old man criticism here. If people are swapping territories out every 90, 180 days or every 365 days, you're getting new territories and accounts are getting new faces. It's going to be very difficult to build strategic 7-figure or 8-figure relationships with those accounts. Now, if you're selling tactical solution to tactical persona and an individual persona can purchase your software without that buying committee that large enterprise software needs, this doesn't apply. But if you're asking people for 7 or 8 figures, that department's at a minimum going to have to get support from other departments to make that sort of investment. Not for the spend, to get it to work. Like you're not getting approval or permission to spend the money. You're getting approval and support for everyone to join in with you and taking that spend and actually bringing it to life. So I think in terms of like building relationships, some of the best sellers I've seen actually have invested quite heavily in some of the brands they sell to. And then the
yeah,
technology changes, but their IP and understanding of how to move initiatives or spend inside of those customers. Those are the global account managers, the people you've heard calling on a specific account for years. But without refactoring how we run sales today and how
Yeah,
frequent.
it's hard. It's
You
hard because
know?
it's like individual basis, and it's like some of the stuff's out of your control. And if you're at a company, you can't control them changing territories or accounts year over year. But I would say if you are taking that long term vision, as you mentioned, you probably could go have an argument to your leadership. Like you're running a huge sales team, Art. Let me ask you this: if a seller was going in, walking the halls, had a unique perspective, had a business plan, and then you're not really talking to them on a day-to-day basis, and then the next fiscal year rolls around, you're like, hey Frankie, hey Griff, we're switching accounts, we're going to swap these accounts out, and Griff's like, I just spent the last 8 months building out this plan, here's my point of view, and I'm just sitting here saying, give me that account, Griff. Like, you're probably going to let Griff keep the account, right? That's not a
Well,
crazy thing to say.
well, that's what I was gonna say. When you said we don't really control things, I was gonna say, getting your executives involved in accounts, showing the progress you're making towards that, demonstrating how relevant you are to your prospect is a really good way to retain account control. At the end of the day, we are in a results business. You know, we rent accounts, we don't own them. And
Love
it's
it.
the
There it is.
I was waiting for that
I was
phrase to
waiting for
come
that.
out.
it's and the rent payment is activity pipeline and eventually, bookings, right? That's when it becomes due. So I think if we take the esoteric, like, hey, I wish we all had enough time to be strategic with our customers, it really is frenetic curiosity. Like, look, there's urgency inside of prospects. I know sometimes we get frustrated that they're moving too slow or they're not getting back to you. That's because you're not relevant. They will get back to you very quickly if what it is that you're doing is relevant. So we're in a relevance game, which is how quickly can you do discovery and how quickly can you do discovery with the people who know what's relevant. And that's why senior titles are so important, because as a senior leader inside of large organizations, sometimes you look down inside your own org and you wonder how clear is it when it goes from C level to SVP to VP to director. And you're like, boy, I hope they know what's most important for us this year. And that's where sometimes vendors can be distractions, where you're trying to keep your team focused on a specific initiative and they get an invite to a ball game or to a dinner or whatever, and then suddenly, new shiny object, and they're bringing a distraction into your org. So part of your job as a buyer and an exec is to keep everyone actually focused on what the declared priorities for the company has been. And our job as prospects is to figure out who actually knows what that is, and then also what their political capital is. And I think that's another thing people underestimate is if Art tells you something, if you go ask 3 or 4 other people about Art's juice or ability to influence, in a very pragmatic way to ask that, Frankie, is if you're and Griff, if you're talking to a prospect, just ask them about the last initiative they sponsored or the last piece of software that they bought and how did that go. And it's a very innocuous question, like, hey, Griff, thanks for having me today. Obviously at the right point in the sales cycle.
Right.
So, hey, how does this software or how does this investment differ from the last one you did? I don't want to hear, I don't know. Let me go ask my manager. I want
Yeah.
to hear like, oh, look, this part takes this long. It's really important that we get this person on board. We're going to get some flack from this department. That tells me this person has bought software before and someone that can actually guide me through the buying process.
There you go. I There's been a lot of great recommendations, so I really hope listeners are paying attention and writing notes down, because I love your approach to annual planning, heat mapping, the fight for relevance, and focusing on the buyer journey. What you don't want to be as a vendor, you said, is a distraction. You don't want to come off as pestering. You want to be coming off as a business partner. What's maybe 1 or 2 more things that you've seen reps do that just completely miss the point or get pushed down the relevance ladder?
So I think the biggest missed opportunity is a lot of times I've heard from both sellers and SEs, I'm getting pulled into post sale. Like, will you tell the post sales team to stop bothering me? Like, which marries up with one of the other most awkward moments I've had, which is closing large deals. So, sorry, let me say buying a big piece of software. So let's say Griffin and Frankie and Art go on a long buyer journey together. We sign the deal and you all are thrilled. We just closed $1.5 million software deal. You're Christian. I've actually gotten calls from marketing departments and sales teams asking if I would do a reference. It just shows me how tone deaf. I'm like, a reference on what? Your sales process? On Frankie and Griff's like selling skills? Like, why don't you call me 9 months from now when we're done with the deployment and I've gotten the outcome? Because I just started my journey as a buyer. So, why I tell that story is the biggest treasure trove of credibility and point of view with your prospects is ride a little bit longer in the post sale. Check in on software you sold a year ago. You want something even better? Check in on competitors' software. And hey, who bought fill in the blank vendor? Oh, it was this department over there. How's that implementation going? I don't know. Do you mind introducing me to them? Hey, I know you guys bought my competitor. I'm just curious, where are you on that journey? Was the implementation easy? If you want credibility with people buying software, being able to talk about the post sale pitfalls, hurdles, or stress will really boost your credibility with them as, hey, this person's not here just selling me something. This person's actually here to help me solve a problem. And so I just think we rob ourselves as SEs and sellers not being more curious. I am not asking sales reps to manage post sale. I'm not asking the SEs to go fix things, but just check in.
Yeah.
Show up on those quarterly or monthly check ins and sit in the background and take notes and send a follow up note to your original EB. Hey, I was just on the implementation check in month 3. Here was some of the things we're talking about. How are you feeling about this deal? Because if it does go sideways, they are going to call you, right, and ask you to save the churn. And so if you just keep a little bit of a pulse, the reward for you as a seller, you'll catch yourself on your next prospect call. Say, I was just working with ABC Corp, and it's interesting. They asked the same question you did, except we're actually in deployment. And here's the 2 options we discussed. And now you just went from sales rep to actually business partner of trying to help drive an outcome.
Yeah, because you're getting the whole point of view as a sales rep, pre-sales, post-sales, implementation, what's good, what's bad, and then that goes back to one of the things you mentioned briefly a second ago. Art is about peer-to-peer references and being able to bring your buyers and introduce them to prospects. There's no better way, and you agree with this, than to build pipeline, than to just have somebody that you had sold your software to and that's a happy customer to go talk to a future customer. Just get them in a room or a Zoom call and get out of the way. Like that's one thing that you taught me and Griff a while ago. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, this is going to make a lot of software companies out there uncomfortable, but I can say it with pride at GrowthLoop, the company I'm at right now. Some of our best pipeline actually comes from customers telling peers of theirs their experience with GrowthLoop. If you have to hide from your install base, I promise you your buyers can find peers. And if you want to see a small group of people, look at a group of CFOs, a group of CMOs, or when I say small, a tight group of folks. For all the references we organize, for all the pitches we do, people will get off the phone and just text a peer they've met in an event, say, hey, you ever worked with this vendor before? What's your experience? One of the number one signals that this is not just an opinion, this is stuff I've read data on that will accelerate deals and increase deal size is a peer-to-peer reference of someone you trust where you've solved the same problem. That's like literally gasoline on a fire.
Mhm.
So like you can go through an entire buyer journey, follow all your sales stages, follow all your criteria, or if Frankie gets connected to Griff and they're both in senior leadership roles someday, an artist selling to one of them, and they say, hey, have you ever worked with this company, or more specifically, this sales team? And you get a F yeah, I bought this software. Not only did it work, but the team is sensational. It just moves you into the VIP first class line, right? Suddenly you're in the short line, interest goes up, sales cycles compress, and the confidence goes up. And so I just really think as companies talk about growth and top of funnel, all very important fuel in the machine. If you're just leaking it out of the back end, you're not going to get that flywheel or compounding loop of growth where your actual customer experience becomes part of your pipeline. And I'm actually shocked how little companies talk about their post sales teams being a source of pipeline because the case studies, the measurement, the impact, and the relationships, a sales team may spend what, 3, 6, 18 months with a prospect. The post sales teams spend years with prospects. They build real relationships. They're the phone that rings on a Saturday when something goes down. So the actual depth and weight of a reference that your post sales team creates to help you go close more deals, I think is a untapped secret weapon that both companies and sellers should lean into more.
I love that. I love the for like, what if you could ask a customer, hey, how do you feel about this company, Frankie or Griffin? It's love the sales team, or I love that rep and the product works great. I don't think you can ask for anything more. Like that's incredible. And I agree. I think the post sales team, I think I just had a conversation this morning with a customer success manager that I work with on the account, and I think second half there's going to be a very big focus on spending more time looking at our existing install base, because of the company I'm at now is such a new logo growth. That's been the focus. I think we've kind of missed the mark on, hey, are we spending as much time trying to find pipeline within our existing accounts? So we're partnering together, and I love that. I think that we need more of that. Okay, so we've talked about some things that maybe sellers miss. We've talked about the buying side. Maybe talk to us a little bit about some other great things that you've seen work, either from your own experience or what you've witnessed from others.
To set context, when we were prepping Art, you said you had what, like 300 unread emails, 75 unlistened voicemails, probably 1,000 LinkedIn requests. So it's wild out there.
No, it was a little bit of, the question, Griff, was Frankie asking like, hey, how does sellers stand out today? I said,
Yeah.
I'm actually starting to ask myself how anyone stands out today. Dramatically increased our ability to create noise, but I'm not sure we've improved the recipient's ability to pull out the signal at the same rate. And so just today, I wish I could show it on the screen. I don't know if it'll show up there. I have 48 voicemails. Okay, so
Just today.
yeah, this is essentially a black brick that I use when I want to use it, because if it was on, actually alerting me with the signals or vibrations that the world would like me to hear, it would be in a constant state of vibrating or ringing. And I'm not at a Fortune 100 company, right? If I was a C-level exec at a Fortune X company, I can only imagine the amount of inbound. I have a full-time person who helps curate my email and has for the better part of a decade, through having assistants, where essentially I'm like, hey, I just need you to pull the signal out of the noise. Anything that looks like sales, spam, or whatever, put it in some other folder. I need notes from my CEO, notes from prospects or customers, and then I might describe a category or an initiative or a topic that's of interest to me, like anything that comes in across ABM or enterprise deployment of AI for marketers. Like there's certain domains, and people use different tools, of course, to filter this as well. We haven't even gotten to internal Slack or LinkedIn direct messages versus just sales nav cold outreach. So what does stand out above the noise is someone I know or I've worked with, peer I respect that has a similar title in a similar organization. Literally today, I asked a prospect, actually not a prospect, a multi-year customer that has a very big Fortune 50 brand that's a customer of our company, who I know used to work at another Fortune 50 brand. So I said, hey, we've been working together a year or so. You've been a customer for years. I think we do a good job. Yep, great. Would you mind making an intro to this person over here? Sure. Will you ghostwrite something for me? This and that, make it easy. Here's the email of the person. Here's what I'd like to say. Would you please send it? This is a multi-seven-figure customer of mine. That person sends that over to that account. It says, hey, I've worked with this vendor. Art's been our exec sponsor. Reasonable and useful executive to do business with. Looking for 15 to 20 minutes of discovery on the following topics. Boom, I got a response in 30 minutes. Sure, how does next week work? Your EA, talk to my EA. I don't know how many other people are spamming that same executive across a bazillion different channels trying to get their attention, but doing the work of the work for the right persona. And this is where go-to-market strategy and target ICPs, target personas really starts to build you that compounding interest, because you'll find birds of a feather. You can host field marketing events where you can get like people together. It will just really accelerate your time to signal, because I think getting signal out of the noise today is more difficult than ever, right? In our personal and professional lives. So I think in a world where we're saying more to more people more often, it's the ground game, at least in B2B enterprise software, that I think wins the day, which is in-person connection, actual results people will acknowledge, not the latest architecture or LinkedIn post. I'm out there. No offense, LinkedIn, as a regular user, but it's pretty chatty out there.
Yeah.
A lot of 36, a lot of 36, 30-second, 60-second, 90-second tips for being wildly successful. So I
Hey,
guess
you're about to be one of them
Love it.
after this podcast comes out, so don't worry. But you're
if
right.
anyone was destined to be a bobblehead TikTok star, it's me.
Yeah, we got you. Um, cool. Anything else on being a buyer? I would love to talk about, the infamous or famous AI topic that we all are wondering about today. Anything you want to touch on before we shift to that topic?
No, I think thinking about the buyer today. I know in our prep notes you talked about sellers have transitioned to AI. I actually wrote in my notes and I crossed out on it that yeah, but have buyers. Like
Yeah.
I know we as sellers have all herded to the AI side of the boat, right? And it's listing, but the question is the buyers, they're still sitting in the center of the boat with the old SaaS software in the cloud. We were going to digitally transform them 10 years ago. Now our entire industry has moved to AI. Well, they're still sitting on the last decade's worth of spend, tracks, org charts, and skill sets. It's great that we're all excited about AI. It's great that we're all moving in that direction as an industry and as investors. But our buyers just got done purchasing cloud-based digitally transformation SaaS software from us. And now we're asking like, nope, that's over. It's all about AI, refactoring. It's going to save you a ton of money. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be near magic. Well, now you're that CMO going into annual planning or the CRO or CFO. You have an org of 300 people. You have a multi 7-figure budget. You have 3-year contract with this vendor. You've got a 1-year contract with that vendor. And all you're hearing from every person is AI all day, every day. And I am certainly not here pushing against the AI trend. I'm saying buyers have to metabolize this trend and figure out how to factor into what they're doing. And they have to factor it in a method that is consumable by their organization, compliant with whatever industry they're in, and also gives them some optionality because regardless of anyone's confidence around which direction is going, which way AI is going right now, I don't even think the stars of the industry who are leading this know exactly where this is going. You know, I think one of the smartest things I ever heard was a CTO from a large company I worked for said once, predicting what's going to happen in tech isn't hard. It's the when part. Things we think are going to take 10 years take 10 months, and the things we think are going to take 10 months take 10 years. And I've just continued to see that play out. And I think AI is one of those trend glaciers that's coming full steam ahead of us right now. And I don't know what the boulders of value that this trend will leave behind. And I actually have empathy for buyers right now because they're just literally just getting hammered over the head that AI is going to solve everything for them. And it's been a pretty big pivot for the buyer.
That's a awesome perspective to think about it that way, because I think you're right. You have to ask the question: Are buyers ready for this whole AI wave?
Well,
So
where do they start?
yeah, exactly,
Like, what
exactly.
goes first? Should they make multiple bets? Should they be making platform bets? Should they be pitting vendors against each other? Is 2026 the year of experiments or the year of production at scale? These are the types of questions that buyers will be asking in house right now. Yeah. I know we got to do AI. Yeah, I know it's coming. I know it's great. Okay, now back here in reality world, we start. How many of these things do I kick off at once? Do I even have the skill sets in my organization? I'm hearing I'm going to have different or less or maybe more empowered people in the future. Well, which ones? Like all at the same time? Who are my internal and external partners going to be on this journey? Right? Am I going for a big consultancy? Do I have to partner more closely with our IT team? And some of those questions
So
are
when you say buyers, have this is their mentality. The buyers. Do you mean specifically the procurement team? Do you specifically mean one team, or do you mean across the org? When you say buyer.
no. So I'm talking more EB. Like
Yeah.
procurement.
Okay.
Procurement is more often implementing decisions that the business had to put their name on. Like the procurement person's not going to get congratulated or in trouble for a bad purchase. It's going to be the person who sponsored the purchase.
Got it.
I think I would use the analogy that if someone said, if you went to the doctor and they said, hey, you need to get healthy, you just turned a certain age, it's time to get fit. Okay, let's make that AI. It's time for AI. You're like, cool. And then the doctor said, hey, you need to improve your diet. You should exercise more, maybe take a look at who you're spending time with, how you're spending your time, how you're spending your money. They just give you 5 or 6 really pragmatic examples for improving your health. Now, if you come home to your family and your wife said, okay, all the junk food's out, I sold the bicycles, there's a gym set in the garage, like how much of that can you actually implement at one time? So maybe you start with removing the junk food or switching which grocery store you shop at, or maybe you start. So companies have the same thing. They have change management and they have momentum. And AI is so big and so exciting, which is great for top of funnel. But as you get down inside that funnel, someone actually has to figure out like, am I getting a gym set first or sneakers first? Am I getting rid of junk food first, or am I going to start burning more calories? And I think how companies can internalize where to start and in what sequence, and your ability to contribute to that through thought leadership, it also shows empathy. And this is where you can explain, hey, I had another customer, same challenge. I was talking with a large Fortune 100 company, and I asked very sincerely to the CTO, who's over thousands of people, how do you even get your head around where to start with AI? And he gave me a great proxy. He said, look, it's a 4 box: inside the company, outside the company, human in the loop, not human in the loop. Outside the company, no human in the loop, handbrake. Like, do not pass go. Our brand is too big, the risk is too high. Internal workloads, human in the loop inside our company, run like the wind. Let's experiment rapidly and figure out what we can accomplish. Inside the company, no human in the loop. Outside the company, human in the loop, risk reward, right? And that type of a 4 box is what a senior exec at a large company has to take with these trends and figure out, like, how do I prioritize so I can get hundreds or thousands of people to make decisions in a cohesive manner.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And just thinking about as a seller, like how do you go pick up on those initiatives so you're not just bringing in those marketing buzzwords like you just mentioned, like for the headlines, but actually saying, okay, you all are working on this specific thing. This is how maybe our AI, if you're selling something that has AI in it, which most people have at this point, can help. But don't just jam AI down their throats just because like that's what everyone's talking about. Like start and play that long term, like you mentioned earlier. And that just goes into doing the right discovery, doing the right prep, doing the right homework, and then meeting them where they are. Like I know when we've talked before in the past, Art, like we have this thought process of like this go to market maturity model or buyer's model, and like meeting them where they are. I don't know, just kind of riffing on like not just overselling something and taking a step back into where they are on their journey.
I think since sincere curiosity combined with a healthy dose of skepticism, like pragmatic, I think the hardest thing for us as sellers, we have to live in the world of aggressive optimism and the art of the possible. Aggressive optimism, the art of the possible, aggressive optimism, the art of the possible. Buyers live in the world of pragmatic skepticism, okay, because it's their
Hmm.
neck on the line. And they know that their company has marketing departments too, right? So they see the claims that are going into these. So as we go hit those prospects, I think remembering you have a day job in the sales organization, but for all of your extra time, be a healthy skeptic, be a detective of facts. Don't just network with other salespeople, network with buyers, even if it's an awkward personality of someone you might normally choose to hang out with on a Saturday afternoon. Spend a few extra minutes with a different persona type or archetype you might not naturally connect with. Be like, hey, what's it like being a data warehouse lead? Like, how much technology do you even buy? Like, were we the best or worst purchase you've made? And the people always go ask their CS team, like, hey, how's my customer doing? Or hey, do you have any references? Like, instead, ask your customer success team, like, hey, who's the most interesting person you talk to on a regular basis? I would love to just sit down with them. You two are professional interviewers. Go interview your actual customer, not just to throw feature requests to your product org, but like ask questions around your solution. And I think being sincerely curious about what you do is a superpower because you just will naturally keep scratching at and digging up more information than if you have a job, right? And if your software or solution you're selling feels like a heavy bag you're carrying around, maybe you need a different bag. But if you find something you're genuinely curious about, you should be equally as pragmatic about whether the shake weight or the Chuck Norris home gym is as effective health and fitness equipment as some of the other things out there if you actually cared about health and fitness.
I love it. genuine curiosity. I think, as Frankie and I have been doing this, I don't know if we're professional, Frankie, for like Art said, but
We haven't made a
we've done
dollar
a
on it
few.
yet,
We've
so
done a few,
I don't know
you
if we
know.
can be professionals.
Well, you mentioned, so genuine curiosity, I think as we look at like the 70 plus episodes we've done, that is one of the most consistent themes that we've heard from our guests of, how you define an elite seller. There's that genuine curiosity, and there's you want to learn from others outside of your purview. Get a fresh perspective. Go talk to the data warehouse manager. Go talk to product. Go talk to CS. Just pick their brain.
Griff, I'll give you an example. I still talk to, what's up, Joe? I still talk to some of the reps that I've done fun big deals with in the past because we had so much fun trying to solve a problem. They're not selling to me anymore. They're not working for me anymore, but we built a relationship because we actually
That's
solved a
awesome.
really hard problem we were curious about. So they'll call me for advice. I'll call them for advice. Um, and instead of just going to your marketing department to answer questions, go ask other people, go ask partners, go ask. That's the other thing is I think we underestimate how much our solutions coexist with other tech partners, system integrators, and consultancies. Trust me, they have an opinion on your technology. They have an opinion on its relevance. And if you have the courage to sit in those conversations and listen honestly, you'll get a lot more aptitude than if you're just looking for pats on the head and gold medals and, new patches for your jacket.
Yeah. It goes back to taking that long-term approach where we can sit there and say how we're going to close this deal in a year or less. But what you're doing is you're going in, you're taking the time to build those relationships to then maybe go to the CMO and say, hey, I've talked to 5 or 10 people in your organization. I put together this unique perspective. And you give that to them as a piece of takeaway. And you're not asking for anything, but you're saying, hey, this is what I found. If you want some more thoughts, let's dig into it.
You can use Disco from account A to make a point to account B. So
Right.
we all want to bottoms up, like, hey, I talked to the director of marketing, the VP of marketing, now I'm talking to the CMO. That CMO is equally as interested to what I've learned from a director, and I'm not talking about sharing IP or competitive intel. I'm saying like, hey, I remember talking about digital transformation with CMOs in the mid 2010s to 2020. And I would ask them, how are you measuring your digital transformation? They'd be like, I don't know, it's a good question. I'd be like, I've been doing a little hobby project of how much of a marketing team's budget's going to headcount versus software. And I'm finding that it's super varied. That, this company is very heavy software technology and low on headcount. Maybe that's digitally transformed. This company that claims it's digitally transforming has a lot higher percentage of headcount to software. Does that feel like the right metric to you? Getting a CMO to talk about how they internalize digital transformation and how they keep scoring their budget, that's a thought leadership conversation versus, hey, I sell Martech software. We're going to make you digitally transformatively awesome, right? That just like, okay, cool, thanks. So I think scratching at some of those things. I think those are the questions we have to answer with AI is buyers right now are saying, so when we say are going to do more with less, is that my department? Is it the people who work for me? Is it me? Is it above me? Is it my whole department? And so I think right now we've let the AI hype out of the bag. It's now time to go from the how to the wow.
Love it. Art, we always like to ask our guests 2 final questions as we wrap. One is resources. Like, what are you paying attention to stay up to date? What's worked for you in the past? Any resources? It could be. We always like books, but if there's podcasts or things you're paying attention to that you feel like are giving you a leg up or have given you a leg up, you got to share some with the audience.
People are still reading books. I'm just kidding.
Audio, baby, audio.
You're speaking to a guy whose house is covered in books.
Yeah.
My new best friend are the LLMs. So if you have not upgraded or paid for, I work at a company building agentic AI software on first party data. So we are very deep on internal tooling across the big models out there. I've got LLMs connected to my hot button. I put my headphones on and I have conversations with them on walk. Hey, I'm thinking about doing an offsite with the boot camp. This is the agenda I'm thinking about. What are your thoughts? What are alternative agendas? How could I restructure this thing? Can you please take those notes and send them to me? So right now, I don't know if this qualifies for staying abreast of trends. I'm a big podcast fan. On the weekends, I will typically get up and consume a few hours of podcasts before the rest of my family's even up over a cup of coffee, feeding the dog, getting the day clean. So Sunday mornings are my podcast time. I've got a few there across the industry. Some of the classic investor ones. Big fan of gosh, who's the design space on this one? Pause. It's something but
The designer?
No. It's like Growth by Design. Hold on. Yako something or other.
Jocko Willink? No, he does a different one.
He's the Navy SEAL.
Winning by Design.
Winning by Design.
So it's actually an organization. Winning by Design publishes this gentleman named, I don't even have, Jocko Vander. I'm gonna guess he's Dutch. But Winning by Design, they put out a lot of really crunchy, thoughtful information that I follow. Along with, I enjoy the Sastra stuff and Jason Lemkin as much as the next person. I think he's both informative and entertaining. But honestly, I think right now, if you're not using AI partner for thinking, researching, and what if, reference information is great. But I actually think the real cheat code right now is asking questions. You've got almost every piece of reference information available inside of LLMs today. So he or she who can ask the smarter questions to challenge them and actually come up with new concepts or new ideas, that's where I think there's competitive advantage right now, is actually original thought that's created from all of this reference information, which you can get to faster than ever before. Read a book for enjoyment, listen to a podcast because it's fun. I think where the competitive edge right now is the combination of legacy thinking with new ideas with horsepower that was very difficult to mimic as an individual.
Yeah, the voice messaging on the LLMs where you can just talk back and forth nowadays, it literally sounds like a human being on the other line. It's wild. So you can run full on go-to-market sessions, therapy sessions, whatever you need. You got it right there.
One of my favorite phrases ever was the size of the question determines the answer.
Yeah.
That is a fun one to play with an LLM. Like you'll be like, hey, what would be a good small business in Sausalito, California? And then you're like, just take the question up. Like you just start ramping up the size of the question and the complexity. It's a pretty fun exercise. Apply it to your craft, apply it to your prospects, and see what sort of answers you can get out of what is essentially a live interactive resource of most, if not all, of the information that's out there.
Yep. Upgrade to the paid version and get going. All right, Art.
yeah.
So the last question we've got for you. You're on the Elite Selling Show. How do you define an elite seller?
Had to go to Florida State.
Yep. Go Knowles.
Florida State, low handicap, enjoys golf.
Yeah.
You know what? I think one of my favorite questions is to ask a prospect who they would recommend we should hire to sell to them. So getting a reference from a buyer that they enjoyed buying from is one of the metrics. Then I think predictability and I think also the ability to work the organization, meaning they're not just a seller or the bobblehead sales doll. They know how to empower their finance team, their legal team. They understand their contracts. They know what their SEs are capable of and how best to use them, and respectful of that time. So I think the elite sellers know how to partner cross-functionally and get the best out of each of the resources that are available for them to use, versus just walking around like, why isn't that department doing what I need them to do? It's a relatively juvenile, selfish way to think of things. Most of the resources around you as a seller are actually there to help you, whether it feels like it or not. And if it doesn't feel like it, maybe it's you, not them, and you should figure out what the unlock is to get them working on your behalf.
So good.
Boom.
All right. Thank you for being on today. It was awesome talking to you and catching up. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right, that is a wrap. Thank you, Art, for joining the Elite Selling Podcast. Frankie and I, we appreciate it. Longtime friend. Always welcome on the podcast. Can't wait to have you back. So some of my favorite takeaways from this episode, there were so many in there around how to put yourself in the shoes of a buyer as a seller. But some of the things that Art mentioned that really stood out. Number one, around understanding where your companies or your prospects or your accounts priorities lie. What are their strategic priorities? Do a heat map of what they have prioritized or what they're heading into next year prioritizing, and attach your solution or product to those priority initiatives. Lastly, one of the things that Art mentioned was genuine curiosity as an elite selling characteristic. We've had multiple guests talk about it, but genuine curiosity is going to set you apart. So, Art, again, thank you for joining. We had a blast. Let's do it again soon.